Welcome to another episode of the Move Smartly Show. My name is John Pasalis. Thank you again for joining us. This week, we have a somewhat regular segment we call the situation, where we go over a number of user questions that people submit to me, some of their personal situations, questions, concerns, what they're going through, or sometimes even just understanding certain aspects of the housing market. And then we go over those questions in a little bit more detail in today's segment. Now, today, I typically have Urmi Desai joining me. For those of you who missed last week's episode, Urmi Desai is transferring and moving on to a position at the Textile Museum of Canada. We have one more show with Urmi, our monthly roundtable that she'll be moderating in October. But today we have Davin McMahon from our brokerage. Davin, welcome to today's episode.
Hi, thank you. And Urmi Desai, I am not, but I'm going to do my best to fill her big shoes. So yeah, thanks for inviting me to join. I love this. I love the segment. It is my favorite for sure.
Yeah, I enjoy it so much too, actually, because you're right. I mean, there's a lot of these, so many of these like personal questions, and people aren't sure about certain things. So it is kind of
Hmm.
fun to kind of go over them. So I'll let you kick it off with kind of the first question that we got.
Definitely. Okay, let's go. Hi, John. I've had my condo listed for sale for a couple of months now. My realtor and I believe it's priced fairly compared to similar units in the area, but it just isn't selling. I'm starting to get frustrated. Are there things I should be doing differently to attract buyers beyond just adjusting the price? Best, Steve.
Interesting. Um, I mean, you can even I'll share my thoughts, but I'm also curious to hear yours. Obviously, you can kind of give some
Mhm.
feedback on this, but a few things jump out before we even kind of talk about things we can do. I mean, there's a few things that jump out even by the wording of the email. Saying that a unit is priced well compared to other units in the area, um, isn't I mean, for me, it doesn't sound great because, again, when we're thinking about comparables for a unit, yeah, okay, what is going on in the neighborhood around you is important. But when we think about value, it's really about units in your building, right? Because, again, two buildings across the street from each other can sell at very different prices per square foot because the age is different, the amenities are different, the finishes are different, all those sorts of things. So, you really have to reevaluate, are you priced well, in fact, per square foot? And I did a segment on their channel last week about how a number of units selling for below market value. So if you're a two-bedroom unit, you want to see what has sold in the entire building, not just your type of unit, because maybe some one plus den sold for this massive discount on a price per square foot basis, which is potentially skewing buyers' expectations of your building. So um, that's kind of where I'll start. The other thing to keep in mind is, yes, we don't know anything about the unit, how it's presented. I mean, sometimes certain things like, and it sounds ridiculous, but basic things like paint color, staging do influence whether someone's going to view the unit. So one thing you want to think about it as a buyer, or as a seller, I should say, is, are you even getting showings? Number one. And to be clear, showings, even if you're priced well as a great unit, are slow, right? So you still may only get three showings a week. Is not bad. It's not bad in this market. If you're getting three a month, no one's viewing your unit. So the potential issues can be somewhat different if you're getting three showings a week but getting no offers versus only getting three showings a month. So if you're not even getting showings, it certainly can be how it's presented online or how it's priced. Whereas if you're getting the viewings and people aren't offering, it could still be the price, but it could also be something about the unit that is not ideal, and not that it's terrible, but I don't know, maybe it's north facing and doesn't have a great view. And, like, with so much inventory, buyers have so many options that they just kind of don't want to compromise very much right now, right? So
Hmm.
they want to go for everything that hits all the boxes. And those are a few things that jump out to me, Davin. I don't know if you had anything else where you were thinking when you saw that.
Yeah, I mean, they did mention, my realtor and I think it's fairly priced. Maybe that's not correct.
Hmm.
That like you said, there could be numerous factors in that building that exist that might temper the price versus what he's looking at in the area, and that's why you said, it's better to look at your own condo building. Some buildings they do have like sister buildings. Condos that come in three phases. I guess those you could take. It really depends on how the condo corporations are set up, if they have similar maintenance fees, things like that. But generally, yes, your same tower. So it may not be fairly priced. It might seem fair to the seller, but what the buyer wants to pay is maybe not lining up. And yeah, like you said, we don't know much about the unit or the listing itself. These are just questions, but maybe it isn't actually presented super well. And I mean, in terms of how it's marketed. First and foremost, like photos, staging of photos. If you don't have those things in spades in this condo market, it's going to be trouble. It's going to be
Yeah,
really hard.
yeah, 100%.
So
I mean,
I
it,
mean, you could do everything right,
mhm.
and it could be a beautiful unit. It could be priced super well. It could be just a fantastic place for someone to live, but maybe the appetite just
Mhm.
isn't there,
Yeah,
right? And if the seller wants to wait it out until that appetite comes, sure. But yeah, adjusting the price is usually the most effective, but maybe it's unique in that it's more of a niche unit as well. Like I said, we don't really know much about it, so it just might be time.
yeah,
Just could be time.
absolutely. And I mean, I saw one unit a little while ago online. I spoke with someone who owns it that I think they had a two-bedroom unit in the low 1 million range, wasn't moving. And I wonder, like, part of it may have been the fact that the unit didn't have parking, right? Like, at some point, at some price point, it's almost an expectation. If you're a, 1,000+ square feet, two bedrooms, low 1 millions, you almost expect to have parking. And the interesting thing in this situation is that the builder in that building actually had parking available to be purchased. And again, if I'm a seller, and what they what they're doing is advertising the property at a price without parking, which of course is going to limit what buyers are offering on it. But what I would do personally if I was in that situation is change my strategy and consider making a conditional offer with the builder to actually buy a parking spot. So basically, you've locked in a parking spot, you're not committed to it, and then you relist the property at a price advertising it with parking and put in the remarks that you're willing to sell it for 50 grand less without parking, right? Because I think what was happening was they're advertising without parking and saying we could add the parking, but again, on the MLS, people have filters. So if you're listing it with zero parking spaces, anyone who wants parking isn't even going to see it, right? So you're better advertising it with parking, even though you technically don't own the parking yet. You have an agreement to lock in that parking spot, advertising it at a price that you would not sell at, assuming it had parking. Um, and then again, put in the broker's comments that the price can be reduced by X tens of thousands if the purchaser doesn't want a parking spot. I think that's a better way to go rather than listing with no parking and saying I'll sell it for X thousand more if you want the parking or something like that.
Yeah, so make it as visible to as many people as you possibly can with a savvy solution like that is kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to,
Yeah,
I mean, again, this doesn't mean the unit's going to sell tomorrow, right? But again, I
sure.
think it goes back to how many people are viewing it, how many showings are you getting, how many views are you getting on realtor.ca? Like we have all those stats. So if you're not getting a lot of visibility and a lot of people coming through, you want to think about things that you can do to change other than just reducing the price, which is easy, right?
Yeah,
So
and
this is,
that
I think, the key thing that we often try to think about, or what are the things that we can do outside of just the price? And obviously, potentially buying a unit is cost to the owner, but again, if that is reflected in a potentially higher sale price, then it covers itself. So what are the things that we can do outside of just reducing the price to get a little bit more visibility?
yeah, and you mentioned realtor.ca, and maybe we'll get in the weeds with this, but maybe it'll be the last comment on the question. So when we're uploading listings, there are certain things you need to do that run in the way in the background that no one really thinks about, and that's selecting to make sure your listing is actually on the data exchange. So if
Oh
you don't
yeah.
click that as yes, it doesn't go to Realosophy.com. It doesn't go to your house sigmas. Does it even go to realtor.ca? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Uh, but if you don't check these boxes, sure, your listing is on the professional MLS, but no one else is going to see it. The average Joe is not going to see your listing at all. Is that a thing that happened? I have no idea. Like I said, probably getting in the weeds with that, but it should be mentioned that that's something that can happen. So
That
yeah,
actually happened to me once. Like clients were looking at buying a property, jokes aside, and we are looking at buying it. The property's on the market for a while. Wasn't getting a lot of activity. It was a multiplex. And at some point I noticed like this property's not on realtor.ca. I mean, my instinct is, I start getting suspicious. I'm like, why isn't it on there? Do they have a dispute with the past tenant? Like, what is going, like, why would the agent not put it there? So we just decided to go ahead with an offer anyways. I can't remember if I found out after or before. I can't remember the timing. But anyways, at some point, I actually raised this with the listing agent. I'm like, why the heck is your property not advertised? Like, my buyers are concerned. And it turns out he just screwed up. Like he just didn't check the right checkbox on the form that you're talking about when uploading it. So it wasn't advertising the unit publicly. Any agents could see it who have access to like the MLS that we see, because so anyone searching there can see it. And if we're sending listings to clients of like this type of home in this area, our clients will get those via email. But people searching publicly on their own on realtor.ca or our site or House Sigma, whatever platform, they weren't noticing it. And it's just, again, the agent you're just making a mistake. And, again, I think this is, aside from it being a mistake, when we upload listings, we have a link on the back end where we can. So realtor.ca is, of course, the most trafficked real estate search website, right? There's obviously tons where listings are on, but we actually can view all of the listing traffic statistics on it. How many people are viewing the property on realtor.ca? How many people liked it? How many saved it? All of that stuff. So this, I think, should be part of any real estate agent's analysis when they're thinking about why is this home not selling? If you're not looking at the traffic statistics, the viewing statistic, the show, what the heck are you looking at? Like, anyhow, that's my rant. But it's
yeah,
a very good point. It's a very good point, and it
no,
impacts people's sales. So that was a good example of we bid on a property because no one was looking at it, quite frankly.
yeah. So sellers, make sure you look yourself at realtor.ca or House Sigmas to see your listing.
Exactly.
Make sure it's
Very good
there. If it's
point.
not, big problems. Okay, next
Beautiful.
question.
Next question.
All right. Hi, John. I'm currently renting, but my sister is trying to buy a home and doesn't quite have enough for the down payment. We're thinking of going in together. Each of us would contribute half the down payment and then share the cost of ownership. My thinking is that this way I can have some exposure to real estate even though I'm renting, while also helping my sister get into the market. What are your thoughts on this idea? What are the pros, cons, and risks I should be aware of before moving forward? Thanks, Susan.
Mm, great question. I mean, the So a couple things. Number one, when you talk about being exposed to real estate, for decades that was always a good thing. In a sluggish market, you want to rethink that. What type of property? Where is it? Again, I'm pretty bullish real estate long term, but in the short term, you want to think about what investment decision you're making. So, and that's not to say you shouldn't. I think there are some people making good decisions, but that's the first thing you want to be mindful of. The second thing is, so anytime you get into any partnership, there are always risks of things not going well. I don't care who it's with, whether it's a sibling or they're like as a best friend. Things can go backwards when money gets involved. So, really, what you want to do is effectively treat this like a business. And I think, one thing that stood out from the question, this idea of, we put the down payment and we share the costs. What does the person mean by that? That they both split the mortgage payment and the taxes? Well, that doesn't make sense because if the sibling is living in the home, they get the benefit of living in the home, right? And
Yeah, when I reread the question, she's still renting.
100%, she's still paying rent. And the sibling is living in the home rent free. I mean,
Yeah,
fine, she's paying 50% of the mortgage payment, but effectively rent free. So the proper way of doing something like this is treating it like a business, not like this sibling, let's shake a hand, here's my. No, you have to think about it like a business and structure it like a business, which means thinking about the purchase of the home between the two siblings as an investment decision and the sister's role as a tenant as something that is separate, right? So what should happen in theory is, you set up a joint bank account and you figure out what is the theoretical, what is the rent that this person would have to pay if my sister rented this home, right? And that sister should, and if it's 3 grand a month, the sister's living in the home should put $3,000 a month towards this joint account. And then from there, all of your expenses come out. And if the 3,000 a month isn't enough to cover your mortgage, tax, whatever, then you split the expenses 50-50,
yeah, okay.
right? It is sort of the net of all of those costs. So this is the best way to structure it is you want to think about it as a business different. The sister is both a tenant in the unit and an owner of the unit. That person's wearing two hats, and you want to think about it differently. And the reality is, if you buy a home, like your most lawyers are probably, they might make you set up some kind of partnership agreement or something just to come up with some basic terms of who's doing what, who's paying for what. But I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea. I think this person was like, let me help my sister. Like they're just short on the down, and it's a great idea. And if that's something you want to invest in, but you want to obviously, you know, do things in a way that kind of makes sense financially for all parties.
Yeah, because she, the sister, is getting the utility of shelter. And so I
Exactly.
guess, yeah, the way you've set it up is that utility is basically going to be the revenue, and then they use that revenue to pay for the expenses. And then anything above and beyond is shared between the two
Yeah.
as additional expense. Is that
Yeah,
correct
100%.
in
That's
a
exactly
nutshell?
it. So if the sister's paying, say, $3,000, and for most people, it seems like a foreign idea because it sounds like she's paying rents to herself, right? But she's paying rents to the partnership, right? You have to think of the partnership as a separate entity from the person who lives in it. So she's paying her, say, $3,000 a month into the partnership. Mortgage is 2 grand, property tax or 500, whatever it is. And if there's a gain at the end of the month because they didn't buy an expensive home, they both put down significant down payments, and there's actually cash at the end of the month, that exceeds the carrying costs, then that money can sit there potentially for future repairs or something like that, and they can decide how to use that, right? But in theory, let's just say there's 10 grand at the end of the year in extra cash that they don't really need. Well, they just take 5 grand each out of it. That's sort of their income, their net income from that property, right? um, and that's generally how you would probably want to structure it. And of course, the person living there isn't paying tax on that income because they live it as a principal residence. Um,
Would it make
so,
sense to set up a real estate holding company to do something like this?
again, that's a good question. I don't like, do you need to set up a company? You got like, it might complicate it a little bit. I don't know if I would. You got to pay like, you know, filing taxes is a little bit different. You got to file taxes now for your corporation and
Hmm.
personal. It's a residential property. It's between two siblings. I probably would just do it as a partnership, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Again, but I'm not a lawyer. I mean, you want to obviously get legal advice on these things, but that's what I see most people doing for these types of scenarios.
And this was a phenomenon we saw in, Toronto Life articles, things like that. Two families coming together, kind of cohabitating in a duplex. So if that's something they want to explore, that could be something where we don't have this one sister paying rent,
Yeah.
and they could both cohabitate. I don't know what their setup is, but that's something to kind of to
And
think
that's
about.
actually a smart idea. And I've been seeing and hearing more people doing this, like people buying two different families buying a duplex together. And for people who aren't from Toronto, like we call duplexes basically residences that have two separate units, typically one on the second floor and another one on the main floor that are two big, say, two-bedroom apartments, right? I know some cities call duplexes what we refer to as semi-detached, where it's a one-family home that is attached on one side. But here, duplexes are basically two-family homes, and triplexes are three-family homes.
Yeah.
So,
In
uh,
New York City, a duplex is a two-story apartment. There's just
yeah.
the word is used differently everywhere. Yeah.
So yeah, and that is another good example of, and people are doing that. They're basically co-ownership agreements. And again, you have to have very specific rules and thoughts into how you're, structuring that, who's paying for what. But yes, it's a very similar idea. You're right.
Yeah. And I know there are instances where a child is sometimes put on a on title for, like, 1% joint ownership. Do you want to talk about what that entails?
Well, I mean, I think people are doing that for a number of different reasons. Like some people are
Mhm.
doing that when they're buying multiple properties. Um, I mean, a common thing that's happening now, the more common thing is the children are buying a home and actually putting the parents on title because they can't get a mortgage on their own. And again, like this is and I've seen a number of articles and headlines about this, about how this is causing stress in families. Like, potentially, like if the kids are having a trouble keeping up with the mortgage payment, so on and so forth, the parents are on the hook. The parents sign the mortgage. They're equally responsible for the mortgage payments. This is why they had to sign, right? It wasn't just to help the kids buy homes, because the kids didn't have enough income to support the mortgage. So, um, yeah, I think this is a thing that people just really need to be very cautious of anytime you co-sign on anything, on a mortgage or partnering up. I think is you just have to be super cautious of.
Yeah, and this would be the same thing that might happen to these two sisters. I'm not sure if she intended to be on title or just, you know help with the down payment, and that's all. But
Well, you
yeah,
for
lots
sure
lots
want to be
lots of
on
moving
title.
parts.
You for
She
sure,
never mentioned that, but I would say, yeah, obviously you'd want to be.
and you're 100% right. Like, I mean, I see some things people do. My head wants to explode because I've seen situations where people cut checks for hundreds of thousands of dollars and they're not on title, and not even like siblings, more like more distant relationships. In my head's like, what are you thinking? Like I've seen like legal disputes in case like that. So for sure, if you're putting up, 50% of the down payment, yeah, you should have a 50% stake in the property for sure.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to the third question.
Our last one probably.
Last question. Correct. Hi, John. Could you guys explain the effects of too low for too long interest rates on housing, and why Stats Canada, doesn't include mortgage payments in calculation of its inflation rate? Thanks, Anwar.
Hmm. This is a bit of a wonky a question for
More
economics
Serbian.
wonks.
Just Dave LaRock in here.
I mean, so there's no specific. So I guess the first question is the effects of too low for too long. So what they're referring to is this saying of, again, interest being too low for too long, which is effectively what we had for well over a decade. After the global financial crisis, rates plummeted, stayed relatively low for an extended period of time. And this is partly what fueled a lot of investment into housing. So when people talk about rates being too low for too long, it means that you're not getting a good return on traditional savings accounts, which pushes more capital to things like housing. People are searching for a higher return on their investment. Not everyone wants to invest in the equities and in stocks. So, certainly, one of the big factors that has pushed housing up over the past decade and a half, I'd say, is the fact that rates were so low. And I mean, and you can see it today. Rates are a fair bit higher. I mean, not the highest level, But in this higher rate environment, we're not getting as much interest in people investing in real estate right now because the numbers don't work as well, right? But when your interest rate is 3% or three and a quarter, the numbers look a little bit better. Now we're, in the fours still. So this is again one of the negative side effects. It leads to, asset inflation, both, in the equities markets and in housing. And, of course, this leads to widening wealth inequalities and all these sort of negative side effects. But that's generally what, is meant by too low for too long. The other negative side effect I should add is almost like what we've seen in Canada, which when interest rates stay too low for too long, people assume that they'll stay that low for a bit, forever, right? And so people just load up on debt, right? And they load up on debt during the boom, buying tons of real estate, max leveraging. So then when rates go to a slightly more normal level, people can't finance it. They can't hold it. They can't afford their payments. And I see this so often when I meet with people and I see like how many properties they own. I'm like, I don't have as many properties as you guys. Like, I don't understand how people were loading up on this stuff, and these are not people who are like millionaires, they just have like normal jobs, right? But just kept loading up on properties, maxed out on debt, and they're struggling now and they can't make ends meet and they can't afford their payments and are really feeling the pressure. And I tweeted out this week or the weekend a chart from RBC showing mortgage arrears skyrocketing in particular in Toronto. So this is refers to people who are I believe the chart was showing people who are more than 90 days behind on their mortgage payments, and it has surged. And again, people can't make ends meet. So when we think about it and we see some of these distressed sales, some of the pressure people are feeling, this again is one of the key drivers that there are a number of people who are over leveraged and can't afford their properties, can't afford their home, can't afford their investment properties. And again, this is one of the negative side effects when we have this extended period of ultra low interest rates.
Well, we were told by a certain Bank of Canada president that they're going to stay low for a long time. Maybe his idea of low is different than others. And I think that statement alone probably caused some trouble for folks.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
really
and
do.
listen, I mean, Tiff Macklem's comment came at the start of COVID, right? And he was very clear that rates are not going up anytime soon. And his comment was effectively encouraging people to load up on debt. Like if you actually read his comment in the context of rates are going to be low, he actually said, "Go out and buy that car. Go out and buy this property. Go out and spend money. Rates are going to stay low for a very long time." And you're right. I think he probably, in hindsight, regrets those words. I mean, certainly did in a couple of years later when rates obviously skyrocketed. But yeah, that is certainly one of the goals of low rates: for get people to load up in debt and spend money. Um, the last part of the question was why.
Why does Stats Canada not include mortgage payments in the calculation of its inflation rate?
Oh, they do include mortgage payments technically.
They don't.
So
They don't
I mean,
include the
not
interest. Is that correct?
they include the interest, not the total payment. So
Got it.
so it's a great question, and this kind of goes back to I think the underlying concern here, and we've heard about it a lot, was during COVID when rates were low, but house prices were skyrocketing, the shelter component, so the housing component on inflation, was insanely low. It was like is it was not contributing to inflation in Canada. And again, I think this is a challenge. And again, people's thoughts are, how the heck can inflation for housing be low when prices are going up 20% per year? This is insane. It makes zero sense. My food's going up, so that's driving up inflation. But somehow house prices going up 20% isn't driving inflation. Doesn't really make sense. And I think again here, to understand this, we have to kind of separate the fact that their houses, in particular owner occupied homes, is what we're talking about right now, not rentals, because rentals are a little bit different. Owner occupied homes serve two functions. Number one, shelter. And number two, they are a financial investment. The same way any other investment is if you invest in stocks or anything else. Um, so, so inflation is meant to cover your shelter costs, not the growth in your asset price, right? So really what it does, and Canada's methodology to it, and every country does something slightly different, but it does actually take into account interest, and it takes into account the expenses of owning a home, which are effectively like interest, property taxes, utilities, some maintenance, things like that. So in low interest rate environments, those costs are actually quite low. And we've got to ignore the fact that, yes, maybe some people are buying at these peak prices and have slightly higher mortgages. At the end of the day, across all of Canada, the vast majority of people saw their housing costs go down when rates went to 2% and whatever it was, high ones during COVID. So our actual housing costs, what we spent out of pocket for the most people, was actually declining, which is what inflation is supposed to measure. And then when the federal government, or the Bank of Canada, I should say, pushed interest rates up, well, this actually fueled housing inflation because everyone's mortgage payments went up. And I shouldn't say their mortgage payment because, again, the inflation that the Bank of Canada uses, the metric, doesn't track your principal repayment, just tracks the interest component of your mortgage. And that, of course, surged. So, again, it's kind of counterintuitive because it's doing two different things. So, again, the shelter inflation for housing actually increased when prices were falling, right? So, again, it's not a perfect metric. The US ignores interest payments and they basically just assume what would it cost you as a homeowner to rent that home at any given point in time, and that's how they track housing inflation for owner occupied homes. So Tiff Macklem did say recently that they're thinking about somehow incorporating how interest rates impact housing prices in their policies. I have no idea how they're going to do that because, again, this is not specific to Canada, this little quirk. I mean, every country has the same issue. They just manage it slightly differently. So that is the slightly long answer to a slightly technical question, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, with their mandate to control inflation, but then by raising rates, it's something that is in fact inflationary. It's tough. It's like a dragon eating its own tail, I think, is what Dave LaRocque would probably say. So
And
it is rather confusing. It's a small portion of the bucket, but nonetheless, it's there.
you're right, because raising rates is meant to cool inflation because it cuts spending on other things. But the one component where raising rates actually fuels inflation is actually with mortgage interest costs. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it is
I
a
think
bit
that's
of a.
that's why a lot of people were crying foul about it being in the calculation, because they're saying no, inflation it isn't in fact going it is in fact going down, so we can stop raising
Yeah,
these rates. So
exactly.
anyway, here we are.
Very good. All right.
Well, thanks for having me, John. That was
Thank you for our
that was good. If you could have me again, that'd be fantastic.
beautiful, absolutely. And thank you all for your questions. Once again, as always, please feel free to send them over to askjohn@movesmartly.com. We don't really share names or personal details. So even if someone sent personal details, we kind of would filter them out to keep them as anonymous as possible. But again, thank you all for your questions. Davin, thank you for joining me. And we'll see everybody next week and next month, probably with another round of your questions.